Today's episode is about a topic that is really important to stepfamilies, but rarely talked about. You are not going to want to miss it. I'm Cameron. I spent years building my career and creating a life I loved. And when my Prince Charming finally showed up, he had 4 kids in tow. Fast forward through lots of mistakes made and lessons learned, stepfamily life was much more complicated than I realized. If you're looking for help with blended family life, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Stepmom Diaries, where we keep it real as we dish about all the things. This is your weekly dose of blended family inspiration and encouragement. You're not the wicked stepmother, so let me help you find your fairy tale ending. Come on, let's do this. Welcome. Today's episode is a really interesting deep dive into something that really isn't talked about a ton in the stepfamily world, but it's something that is hugely important. And if you are anywhere near my age range, it is also something that you are thinking about if your parents are older. We are talking about planning with your parents, what happens after they go, and how to make that a little easier when it can be so complicated for blended families. So today I am welcoming Tara Yukawa. She is a certified executor advisor and the founder of Sage Vault, based in Austin, Texas. After losing both of her in-laws within hours of each other and stepping into the huge amount of chaos that followed that, she turned that experience into her mission, helping families get organized before loss forces their hand. She is also a stepdaughter and part of a blended family with 4 adult children and understands firsthand how layered these dynamics are, how quickly good intentions can unravel without having a clear plan in place. And Tara works with families on legacy planning and preparation, and she supports executors through the overwhelming responsibility of settling an estate so that they can move forward with clarity, structure, and with a lot less overwhelm. This is a long overdue discussion, and I think you're really going to get a lot out of it. So let's get into it. Tara, I am so excited to have you here and so excited for this discussion.
Me too. Thank you, Cameron.
Yes, absolutely. So, I always like to ask my guests, because mostly it's stepmoms, I always like to ask their stepmom origin story. You are not a stepmom, but you are a stepdaughter. So let's talk about your stepfamily origin story and then how you got here.
Yeah, for sure. So my dad and stepmom got remarried, or they married each other when I was about 15 or 16 years old. So, now they've been married for, almost 25 years, or maybe it is 25 years. They're probably going to smack me for that one for not getting the number right. So I am the oldest adult daughter in a stepfamily relationship. So there's 4 kids total, 2 on each side.
That's great. And so how did that experience shape you growing up? Because I know, 15, first of all, that's hard to have a new person coming into your life. And that's a hard age anyway. I always say to my step-parents, if you've got teen stepkids in the house, check and see if their behavior is really stepfamily behavior or just teen behavior, because we all know we were jerks at that age, right?
No, you're exactly right. And I think, one of the things that you've done such a good job of sharing on the podcast is, depending on where the child is coming from and how much trauma they've had and things like that, that can really change the dynamics. And I was one of those children. I came from, my mom was an addict. And so we had a lot of trauma there. And so there was a lot of trust building that had to happen over time. And as you mentioned, during the teen years became even more challenging. And my stepmom ended up honestly being wonderful. And she is wonderful. But I won't lie, as I have gotten older and become a parent myself, our relationship has gotten harder and required us to be a lot more intentional with our relationship and how we interact. And so that's been an interesting transition.
Yeah, I love to hear that. I think that really underscores, for the stepmoms listening, it is possible if you've got that rocky relationship with your teen that it can get better. But it's not necessarily always going to be perfect. Even when it gets better, you're going to have, I always use and I apologize for those listening, but if you're watching us on YouTube, I'm doing with my hands, it's you're doing that upward trajectory, but then you have the bumps where you go down and then you go back up and then you go down and go up,
Yes, exactly.
it's a tough role. Whether you're a kid, I mean, kids are, I think, in the hardest position, but yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about your background, because I think what you do is so fascinating, and it's something that we don't talk enough about in the blended family context. So tell me a little bit about how you started this really interesting, amazing company that you run.
Yeah. So I'm going to take a few steps back. So my background is actually in corporate operations. And so for 20 years, I helped companies solve complex systems and problems and find efficiencies through people, processes, and technology. So, a few years ago, I was a VP of operations. Had a big time job that required a lot of me. My husband also had a very important job. And we had two small kids. They were in elementary school. My kids I have two boys. They're 8 and 10. And then we lost both of my husband's parents in the same day. And, dementia was involved, an accident was involved, but all of a sudden we found ourselves in this role of executor. And we had never talked about it. There was never like a sit down conversation of, hey, here's what we have in order. These are the plans. This is what needs to happen. We were just thrust into this role. And silver lining, they had done some of their planning, which was, they had a will, they had a trust, they had thought about their house, but that actually wasn't the hardest part. So, we're grieving. We now have this project plan of all of these tasks, and then things that are so small as what's the password to get into the email could set us back weeks. So it constantly felt like this scavenger hunt, this one step forward, two steps back. And I was like, why is nobody talking about this? Why don't I have somebody to help me and hold my hand and guide me through this? Because I don't have time to waste time.
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, you're right in that middle of the sandwich generation, which I think many of us are, where you're bringing up kids and your parents are also at the age where you've got to start thinking about this stuff,
Exactly. And so, I'm, working on having that conversation with my dad and my stepmom in real time. It's also why I wrote a book, reaching to grab a copy of it. It's called Before It's Too Late. And this is a workbook to help adult children have the conversation with their parents, because the boomer generation and the silent generation are exactly that. They're silent and they don't like to talk about it. Nobody wants to be parented by their children.
Yes.
First of all. But second, I think a common misconception is they think that our aging parents are protecting us by not having the conversation. And in actuality, creates a lot of unnecessary conflict, particularly in blended families.
Well, and it's hard too, because I know I've had this conversation with my parents. They don't want to have the conversation. And then when you as a child try to have it, their response is kind of like, well, you're going to get everything anyway, so you don't worry about it, And it's like, no, I'm actually trying to make it better for you as you get age and figure all of this stuff out. It's not, yes, there is some self-interest because things could be really bad after the fact, but
right.
It is hard to get them to be willing to kind of do the things that need to be done. So what does your book take people through? Because I feel like a lot of folks listening to this are going to be heading to Amazon in order, right?
Yeah. So the book really sort of flips the script. So a lot of times, especially as us type A daughters, I'm going to assume that that's a good chunk of your audience that are the hyper planners. They want to walk in and talk to their parents with the checklist and the spreadsheet. And that is not the right approach. You will often face, a lot of conflict and pushback taking that approach, when instead, if you really start to ask curiosity questions about, Mom, Dad, what are you most proud of in your life? What do you love the most? And it begins to sort of help you tap into some of their stories. So as an example, my grandmother she had a PhD in mathematics, and she taught at the university level, and that is what she is most proud of. And, she didn't do the planning that maybe she should have done, but, because we knew those things about her and we knew that that is what made her most proud, we were able to help create a scholarship fund in her name. So it's things like that where you can start to get them telling stories about what's most important to them and who they really are. And one, it's beautiful because it gives you an opportunity to have this conversation But two, it then helps you be able to then prompt the next question, which is, why don't you leave a scholarship fund?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
And that's a good way to sort of break into that story.
Yeah. I got a small taste of doing that. And I love that approach. It's not something I had thought about, but I was doing an assignment recently. I'm in grad school getting my master's in clinical mental health counseling and was taking family counseling. And so one of the things that we had to do was create a genogram, which is, a chart of it's basically a family tree. And so we had to create our own going back to our grandparents. And so it was such a wonderful opportunity. I'm an only child, for me to go and have those conversations with my mom and my dad, like, hey, I want to make sure that I have all the names and dates right. And I found out stuff that, like, I thought I knew my grandparents and, their histories. And I found out some really amazing stuff that I had no idea about, including like siblings of theirs that I didn't know existed, And it really is such a great opportunity. And we all should be taking advantage of these years and getting that information from our parents, because I think it's hard to kind of focus on that in today's day and age, but otherwise, like, that stuff gets lost.
Yeah. And so after I wrote my book and I started having friends sort of come out of the woodwork of, Tara, I just lost my mom. What do I do? Or, Tara, I've seen your book. I need to have this conversation with my parents. What do I do? And at that point, I was really digging into trying to figure out, what is it that people really need? So I became a certified executor advisor. And so now I offer consulting services to people on the non-legal side of planning. And then I support executors and trustees after they've lost a loved one. And working with me, most of my clients, we end up helping them save over 100 hours of time, just because I've walked this path and I've walked this path with others. And typically somebody steps into this role and they've never had the job before. There's no job description. And so we're able to build out a plan that's completely customized to them. And, we hit roadblocks along the way, but we work through it. And we're able to sequence all of the things to make sure that they don't introduce any risk, that everything is handled appropriately, that it doesn't put the executor or the trustee in legal risk at all, and really helps them get to the end faster so that they have space to grieve. But also just because, again, like, we are busy women, and not to say that all the executors and trustees are always women, but we're busy people and we don't have time to waste time.
Absolutely. Well, so tell me, this is amazing. And I just, it's such a gift that you can give to families that are grieving, right? To have this be just a little bit smoother, Tell me how this plays out and what you've seen. I know you do a lot of work with blended families. Like, what are the things? This is not something that many of us in the stepfamily space are talking about. And I just think it's really it's not only fascinating, but it's something that I think we need to be talking about. So tell me what we need to know as blended families.
Yeah. I think one of the key things that you need to know is, like, what are the default settings by the law? So if somebody loses a loved one, or if somebody passes, the next in line is their spouse and biological children. And then it starts going down the line. It goes to parents, then it goes to siblings, then it goes to aunts and uncles, et cetera, et cetera. And what can often happen if you do nothing, if you have no plan, is that it goes to those default settings, and that may or may not be what you want to happen. So I'll give you an example. I'll use my family as an example. Let's say so my dad has 2 daughters, my stepmom has a daughter and a son. And if they have nothing, then what will happen, and I'm going to make some assumptions that they live in the state of Texas, which they don't. They live in Colorado, but Texas is a community property state. And so let me tell you what that means, is that if you don't change the deed on your house, what the default is that the surviving spouse maintains their half of the home, and then half of their deceased spouse, half of the home. So that means the kids get a quarter.
So all of a sudden, if you're a stepmom, a quarter of your home is now owned by your stepkids.
Yes. And if the stepkids say, it's yours, don't worry about it, that sometimes happens. But also, the stepkids can say, nope, I want my quarter. And if you can't pay that quarter, then they can take you to court and make you sell your house.
Yeah.
So heartbreaking for
everybody.
everybody,
Yeah.
for everybody, because not only is it like a financial burden, a housing burden, but so much unnecessary conflict, right?
Yes.
So then on the flip side, here's another thing that often happens is, let's say they do have a plan and they say everything goes to the surviving spouse, and they do that for each other. If they have not built the plan in such a way that when that surviving spouse passes, that it distributes across all kids, however that is meant to look, there can be kids that unintentionally get completely left out. So for example, if my dad were to leave everything to his wife, when his wife passes, everything goes to her kids, and my sister and I get zero. And vice versa. If the death order happens the other way, her kids get left out. And that, of course, is not the intention.
No, and that actually is a scenario that I have seen play out with friends of mine who I have a dear friend whose father passed away suddenly. Her stepmother got everything, and she couldn't even get like some of the family artifacts that she really wanted. Like she had a bad relationship with the stepmom. The stepmom wouldn't give her anything. And it's so important to have these conversations with your spouse and make sure this stuff is taken care of. And if you have a situation, Craig and I have talked about it, and everything goes to me. We have some stuff for the kids, but I also know that I will make sure the kids are taken care of. You know what I mean? It's, you've got to look at the relationships there, and that makes it so much more complicated.
Yeah, exactly.
So who is the executor usually, and how does that work in a blended family?
Yes. An executor is the manager of an estate, and a trustee is a manager of a trust. And both of those roles are fiduciary roles, which means they have to do what is in the best interest of the vessel that they're managing. So whether that be the estate or whether that be what is held in a trust. And that is the sole responsibility. And that also means that the executor has to make sure that the funeral is paid for, that the debts are paid off, that assets are managed and distributed properly. And so it can be a long process. It can be anywhere from 6 months to years, depending on how well organized or how complex the estate is.
Mm-hmm.
And it often ends up being the oldest child, or the child that has it the most together. But here's what I found out is that person is the default person for everything. It's the person that's planning the vacations. It's the person that has big time jobs. The person that is overextended.
Yep.
is often the executor or the trustee. And that's okay. But making sure that you have that conversation with them. So one, they have an opportunity to ask questions.
Yeah.
And two, just to make sure that they understand the scope of the project and that they know what to do. And I hate to call it a project, but it is.
Yeah.
And in the midst of grief, it is even more challenging. But it also doesn't have to be a family member. An executor can be a close friend. You can hire a third-party executor or trustee. It's just a professional fiduciary.
Now, if you're asking a close friend to be an executor, is that putting a huge burden on them? I mean, we're talking about this process can be really long, and is that?
I am not going to lie. It is a burden. Being an executor or being a trustee is a burden. It is a big task, and that is why being really buttoned up with your planning. And guys, a will is not enough. You need a
Tell me more about that.
Okay. So
I think a lot of people are cool, I've got a will, I'm good.
Guys, a will is not enough. So and to caveat, I'm not a legal professional, so don't take this as legal advice, but I do have a lot of legal professionals that I work with, and this is something that we talk about all of the time. So a will names the executor or whoever the fiduciary is. It says who is responsible or who's the guardian for minor children. So let's put a pin in minor children. We're going to come back. Let's come back to that in a little bit. And then it also says what happens with my stuff. So that's what a will does. A will always goes to probate court. So if you have a will only, your family is going to have to go to probate. They're going to have to get letters testamentary, which means that the judge says, yes, this is the executor. This will is valid. Proceed.
And is that in Texas or everywhere it automatically goes to probate?
It certainly does in Texas. I can't speak to every county. So that's the other key thing to note here is that it differs county by county, not just state by state, on how probate is handled and how much the courts are involved in the entire process. So that's a great question, and definitely why it's really important that when you are selecting an estate or probate attorney, that you do want to pick somebody who's local and understands and knows not just somebody in the state, but somebody ideally in your specific county that can help advise based upon, whatever the county procedures are.
That's good advice. Such good advice. We just moved states last year and we kind of talked about nothing's really changed. Do we need to redo our will? Do we need to? And we ultimately decided to get a lawyer here in Maine and do it here. And I think that I'm so glad that reinforces that we did the right thing.
No, you did. And I think that even if the one that you previously did in another state may be completely fine, but it is worth the couple of $100s to have an attorney review it and give you expert legal advice always. So let's also talk about going back to some of the default settings that I talked about before. So another really set of important documents are powers of attorney. So a medical power of attorney has a default to next of kin. So if you don't have a medical power of attorney, it's going to go to your spouse and then to your children and down the line, like we talked about before. However, you may not want your spouse to be making medical decisions for you, or you may be of an age where you're like, you know what, we're both getting older. We should probably have our children or a close friend, this is also something where you can hire a third-party professional medical power of attorney that can have conversations with you while you're in good health and then make sure that those are followed as you age. There's lots of options there. But one document that does not have a default setting is the durable power of attorney. And honestly, this is the most important one. And because there are no default settings, and what that means is that if you're incapacitated, that could mean you're in a car accident and you're out for several months, and then you're back and you're healthy again and everything's fine. This isn't a permanent document, but the powers of attorney are only valid while you're living. But the durable power of attorney allows somebody to pay bills for you, to manage your home, to act as your agent, to act as you and to care for you or care for your things while you're not able to do it for themselves or while you're not able to do it for yourself. And that is why this document is particularly important, because there are no default settings. So let's say that somebody is incapacitated for a number of months. Without this document, their family would have to go to a long court proceeding and an expensive court proceeding just to make sure that their home is taken care of and their bills are paid and things like that.
And that's the one I feel like parents are hesitant to do. I think there's a fear that the kids are going to come in, whether it's stepkids or biological kids, that the kids are going to come in and do something behind their back or, get up to no good with, you know what I mean? But it's so important that be done.
Well, the beautiful thing about a durable power of attorney is that you can completely customize it. So as an example, you can say my durable power of attorney is allowed to pay my bills, but they cannot do any sort of real estate transactions and they cannot do any sort of transactions with my investments. You can put guardrails on what they can do and what they can't do, but also you can say, I need a third-party medical professional to confirm I am indeed incapacitated and can't handle this myself. So then what it looks like is that durable power of attorney goes to the mortgage lender or whatever it may be and say, here's the letter from the doctor. Here is the durable power of attorney. Those two things together are the only thing that gives them access to the bank account, for example. So you can set those guardrails in place to prevent exactly what you're describing.
Yeah. Oh, that's such helpful advice. So there are a lot of opportunities for conflict here with, first families, but I think especially with blended families. I mean, what are the things that most often go wrong, and what can a stepfamily do to protect themselves from it? Is it as simple as having conversation?
So some of the things that we've talked about, right? So assets going somewhere that they weren't intended to, which is one of the things that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
The other thing is, the surviving spouse and the children being in conflict, super common. And then the executor and the trustee, particularly if they are a family member, often get stuck in the middle. And it's not because they don't have the skills to manage. It's because of this misconception of what the role actually is. But what families, one, need to do is you do need to go to an attorney. And there are, of course, online solutions and things like that. Really, particularly in blended families, you want to go to a local attorney and make sure that that attorney understands what happens in all of the various scenarios. What if this spouse dies first, or this spouse dies first, or what if there's, a child that has a gambling problem, or like whatever the things are, right, for your unique family situation, to plan all of that, get it out on the table with an attorney and get your documents prepared. And then whoever is going to be the executor or the trustee, that you have that conversation.
Yeah. And it's okay to interview attorneys too, right? Like you don't have to just go hire the first person. You can ask attorneys like, hey, have you dealt with complicated families like step families? Have you dealt with scenarios like this? And if they don't give you a good answer, don't work with them.
Move on.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Move on. Same.
One of the things that...
Therapist.
Oh, I'm sorry, Cameron, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say the same thing I tell people with coaches and therapists. Like, if you don't find somebody that understands step families and these complicated dynamics, don't work with them.
You're exactly right. And there's a lot of attorneys that will do free consultations. A lot of people don't even, like, some of the hesitations that I hear is, I don't have enough money. I don't have an estate. And everybody has an estate. It's whatever you own, that is your estate, whether it be worth $1,000 or $1 million. You have an estate, and it's all of the assets that you own. Going to an attorney can feel really scary. It can feel, oh my God, I don't want to look dumb. I don't know what I don't know. They're going to charge me $500 an hour. Like all the stories that people tell themselves. Doing this work is the greatest act of love.
It really is. And I'm going to add to the scary part about the attorney. They're going to ask you some questions that feel really invasive.
Yes.
They have to know all of this information to get everything together for you. And so you're going to get into stuff with them that you may not get into with your best friends,
Exactly.
or your spouse. But all of that really is, I mean, you're exactly right. It's the greatest act of love you can do for the people in your life, whether you're in a blended family or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Tara, tell us more about where we can find you and what you've got out there and how people can work with you, because this conversation, I mean, we could talk for like 3 hours about this because it's all so important and so relevant for blended families. But
yes,
tell us how we can find and work with you.
So you can visit my website, which is mysagevault.com. And I also have a weekly newsletter where I'm talking about this exact thing all the time. Whether you're an executor, a trustee, you're planning for yourself, or you're helping your aging parents plan, we've got a great newsletter that is weekly, and I would love for you to subscribe. So if you go to mysagevault.com/newsletter, you can subscribe there.
Amazing. And we will put links to all of this in the show notes and on the YouTube description for the episode.
And I'm on social media as well under My Sage Vault.
Yes, go find Tara, follow her, subscribe to her newsletter. These resources are going to be invaluable. No matter what age you are going to have to deal with this at some point. So it is worth getting a handle on earlier rather than later. Tara, thank you so very much for being here. Really appreciate it. I feel like we're going to have you back to do another session.
Let's do it.
See you later.
Thanks, Cameron.
If this episode spoke to you or touched your heart, would you do me a favor? Take 10 seconds to go and follow the show, leave us a 5-star review, and share this episode with another stepmom who might need to hear it. Your support is going to help grow our blended family community, and you never know whose life you might change.